welcome to our SBT Sutra Studies class, our ongoing exploration of the Buddha Sutras. My name is Venerable Tarpa, and before we begin our class, let's take a moment as usual to appreciate our handsome community gathered here today. Today I feel fortunate to sit as a member of this kind community in the safety and security of like-minded friends, sharing this present moment with others dedicated to the cultivation of goodness. Today, I'm grateful for the direction and support that this community provides. A community worthy of my time and commitment. A community where my efforts have meaning, purpose, and are appreciated. Today, I'm thankful for this community of awakening, a place to gain the knowledge and skills to improve my life. A family, a home, and a sanctuary for all of us seeking refuge from the storm. And, like always, let's remember, as conscientious practitioners, we must recognize our responsibility to the world, to strive to live skillfully while helping others to do the same, to strive to live in balance and harmony with nature and others, to strive to gain mastery over our minds and embody our true benevolent nature, to expand our hearts and minds, transcending our shared human limitations, to not intentionally harm sentient life or our planet, to maturely accept and embrace the reality of our situation while striving to improve it. Again, welcome back to our SBT Sutra Studies class. We are currently examining the Dhammachakkapavatana Sutra. Say that 10 times fast. Wow. The setting in motion of the Wheel of Dharma Sutra, or simply the Wheel Turning Sutra. But before we get to our class, let's take a moment just to review what we've been talking about so far. And I think I'll just pop these up as memes, or we could just look at a couple here. So in this sutra, we're primarily talking about the Four Noble Truths. And so the Four Noble Truths are, first, the truth of suffering. Second, the truth of the cause of suffering. 3, the truth of the cessation or stopping of suffering. And 4, the truth of the path leading to the stopping of suffering, which is the Eightfold Path. SBT has a unique way of looking at these. For SBT, we see the Four Noble Truths as 1, the existence of samsara, 2, the cause of samsara, 3, the existence of nirvana, and 4, the cause of nirvana. And that pertains to the meaning of the Four Noble Truths for SBT, meaning 1, that samsara is suffering. Usually they'll translate the first as life is suffering, but not all life. Enlightened life is free of suffering. So it's clear that what the Buddha is talking about is that samsara is suffering. 2, samsara is caused by holding wrong views of the true nature and the true nature of reality. 3, that nirvana is the absence of samsara. And 4, nirvana is caused by holding right views of the true nature, of our true nature and the true nature of reality. And right view is attained through following the Eightfold Path. Okay, and we're going to talk about this one in a second. So that's a little review to get us back up to speed. And with that said, today we're going to be on our 4th class for the Wheel Turning Sutra. And we're going to be talking today about the 12 aspects of the Four Noble Truths. And so let's begin by reading through the sutras. We have any volunteer readers? Darcy, would you like to do a little reading? Mike, would you like to do a little reading? Okay. And I think Neil always loves to do some reading as well. And let me put that up here for us. We're going to start with Bhikkhu Bodhi. Now, um, when we're reading, I'm putting these in word form up here so I can edit them. Choki Rinpoche's text throughout this whole exploration of the Wheel Turning Sutra has been quite strange. I thought it was cool that I found a representation of it through Tibetan Buddhism. But it's been a little bit hard to follow. And one of the reasons is that it's translated from the Sanskrit, but also within the Kangyor and Tengyor in Tibetan Buddhism, or the Buddhist canon, um, sometimes things are categorized a little bit differently. Meaning is that they give a very short presentation of this very short sutra, but the information that seems to be missing can be found in other parts of the canon as well. And so that makes it a little bit difficult, but nevertheless, it adds a little bit of information, not just of the sutra, but of the difference between the traditions. And I do have to say, throughout the exploration of the sutra, Thich Nhat Hanh's version has just been exemplary. It's a wonderful presentation and by far the clearest. I think Bhikkhu Bodhi's, the one that I have on the screen right now, is probably the closest to the original sutra, but nevertheless, Thich Nhat Hanh's is a wonderful read. It's very easy to read, and I think it's poignant and graceful. It's very beautiful. Okay, with that said, I have this part kind of in this brownish color, and I wanted to just kind of read through this. Um, and Tashi, would you like to do us the honor of reading through this? Now, the sutras are notoriously strange to read, and even the presentations. So feel free to take your time and don't worry if you stumble. One of the things that makes them hard to read, they tend to be really annoyingly repetitive. And so what was nice is Thich Nhat Hanh kind of takes that out of it. It gives a straightforward presentation. So don't let that bother you, Tashi. Why don't you start up right up here?
Sure. So long, bhikkhus, as my knowledge and vision of these Four Noble Truths as they really are in their three phases and 12 aspects was not thoroughly purified in this way. I did not claim to have awakened to the unsurpassed perfect enlightenment in this world with its devas, Mara, and Brahma, in this generation with its ascetics and Brahmins, its devas and humans. But when my knowledge and vision of these Four Noble Truths as they really are in their three phrases and 12 aspects was thoroughly purified in this way, then I claimed to have awakened to the unsurpassed perfect enlightenment in this world with its devas, Mara, and Brahma. In this generation with its ascetics and Brahmins, its devas and humans. The knowledge and vision arose in me. Unshakable is the liberation of my mind. This is my last birth. Now there is no more renewed existence.
Oh, you did a great job reading that. And as you can tell, it reads quite cryptic, right? Like even the first part when he's talking about, um, I was not thoroughly purified in this way and what he's saying is through understanding the Four Noble truths through their three phases, um, I reached enlightenment. So that's what the Buddha's claiming here. And then they talk about some of the fellow beings that are walking the earth with everybody. We have devas, where lower gods or devas. We have Mara, which is used to be the Lord of Death. Mara is really our afflictive behaviors, and Brahma, which is the god in Hinduism. In the time it wasn't Hinduism, it was Brahmanism, and Brahma was the favorite of all the gods at that time. And then we also have ascetics and Brahmins. So ascetics would be those forest dwellers meditating. Brahmins refers to the priest class that worship Brahma. And you even got some human beings in there. So you got a big arrangement of people in that all. And And so through this knowledge that we're going to talk about in a second, the Buddha says, the knowledge and vision arose in me. Unshakable is the liberation of my mind. That's a powerful statement, isn't it? And this is the difference. Like many people in the Buddha's day claim that they've reached enlightenment. And the Buddha, oftentimes their students, were sure that he hadn't. And for some reason, the Buddha always had a suspicion that there was more, where the other people reached some kind of profound state and they said, oh, that's it. The Buddha knew there must be more. And so he kept trying, but he does reach a point, and here it is, where he says, oh, no more, this is it. My mind is liberated right now, and this is unshakable. And then he says, this is my last birth. So again, in secular Buddhism, we have folks that have a belief in rebirth, and we have folks that don't. But it's again very clear that the Buddha did have a belief in Buddhism. Some think that rebirth was kind of added to the sutras at a later time, and there could be truth to that. But it's so inundated with references about rebirth, it seems to be impossible. I mean, they're just in all the Buddha sutras. And here, they're just dropped in these little pearls like that one. The Buddha is sure that he has a full, unshakable liberation that he's not going to fall away from. And he's sure that this is his last birth, that he's not going to take rebirth again. So clearly, the Buddha believes in rebirth, but we don't have to, just because it's stated there. It's still up to us. Now there was no more renewed existence. That sounds very poetic, but again, it's just a present. It's just a translation. We're not sure of the original. Okay, thank you, Darcy. We're going to get to this in a second, but now I want to share Thich Nhat Hanh's, and we're going to share Chokyi Rinpoche's in a second, because it really refers to something different than what we're talking about here at the beginning. Mike, would you like to read this? This is a short piece. It's terribly repetitive, and if you want to, here's an idea, Mike. The last part of it is exactly the same for all of them. How about we just read the first line through the bold, and the first one read the whole thing, but on the following ones, just read up through the bold parts, if that makes sense. Are you there, Mike? Are you muted?
Yeah, I guess you got to unmute. So here we go. Monks, when I realized the noble truth of suffering, seeing, understanding, insight, wisdom, and light arose in me with regard to things I had not heard before. Monks, when I realized the noble truth of suffering needs to be understood, etc. Monks, when I realized the noble truth of suffering has been understood, etc. When I realized the noble truth of the causes of suffering, etc. When I realized the causes of suffering need to be given up, etc. When I realized that the causes of suffering have been given up, etc. When I realized the noble truth of ending suffering, etc. When I realized the ending of suffering needs to be experienced, etc. When I realized the ending of suffering has been experienced, etc. When I realized the noble truth of the path that leads to the end of suffering, etc. And a couple more here. When I realized that the path that leads to the end of suffering needs to be practiced.
Now the whole thing.
Seeing, understanding, insight, and wisdom, and light arose in me with regard to things I have not heard before. Another one.
Yeah, the last one, the whole thing, please.
When I realized that the path that leads to the end of suffering has been practiced, seen, understanding, insight, wisdom, and light arose in me with regard to things I had not heard before.
And you could finish these 2 paragraphs if you would. Or how
Yes.
about stopping there? How about letting Neil do some reading here? Neil, do you want to do some reading?
Yeah, okay. As long as insight and understanding of the Four Noble Truths in their 3 stages and 12 aspects, just as they are, had not been realised, I could say that in the world with its gods, Maras, Brahmins, recluses, Brahmins and humans, someone who had realised the highest awakening, monks, as soon as insight and understanding of the Four Noble Truths in their 3 stages and 12 aspects, just as they are, had been realised, I could say that in this world, with its gods, Maras, Brahmins, recluses, Brahmins, and humans, someone had realised the highest awakening, that understanding and seeing had arisen, that the liberation of my mind is unshakable, that this is my last birth, that there is no more becoming.
Oh, great job. Thank you. And so it's interesting. The Buddha liked to use negating terms quite a bit. So the first paragraph, he states it in the negative term. As long as nobody has done these, there's no realization. And in the second one, he states it in the positive. Many assert that one of the reasons the sutras read so strangely and they're so repetitive is because they were put in a format to be chanted well. And so a lot like lyrics in your favorite pop song that repeat, right? I think that was the idea, that you had like this catchy verse and you keep going through the verse with just a little change. So maybe it's like that beer song when you're driving in the car. 99 bottles of beer on the wall, and then you just change the number and everybody knows the lyrics and everybody can sing along, right? Did I get a joke? Did I get a laugh out of that joke? That was a good one. Okay. Anyways, that's thanks. That's a good guess at why they read the way they do. So I'm going to make this easy for everybody because I don't think there is an easy presentation of it, and we're going to do that by. Let me stop 1 second. I don't know if I always have to. Come out to put a new topic up. 1 second, everybody. Let me call this up. I think this is it. Yeah, here we go. So, ladies and gentlemen, this is a little chart I made up that makes it a little easier to understand the 12 aspects of the Four Noble Truths. So, there's 3 knowledges or realizations according to each one of the Four Noble Truths. And let's take a look at what those are. So with the suffering, this is an easy one to understand. So the first one is the knowledge that suffering is suffering. And what that means is understanding thoroughly exactly what suffering is. And the reason they word it this way is that there's many times where we might actually think we're experiencing pleasure when we're actually experiencing suffering, or we're in the midst of creating suffering. And this is probably an obvious example would be in non-virtuous behavior, whatever that might be, where we're committing the non-virtue, but with the idea that somehow there's pleasure being derived from it. But ultimately, for a person who knows what's to be abandoned and what's to be cultivated, and that person understands the subtle nature of suffering and the hidden nature of suffering, that even things that seem pleasurable, either there's a hidden suffering or that pleasure will lead to further suffering. When they understand suffering completely, they know the ins and outs of suffering. So the knowledge that suffering is suffering, inside and out. So that's the first knowledge. The second one is the knowledge that suffering must be understood. So the first one is knowing what suffering is inside and out. And the second one is knowing that suffering, especially in order to liberate yourself from it, it has to be fully understood inside and out. The third knowledge is unusual. It says the knowledge that suffering has been understood. If you notice, the third aspect of each one is past tense. So imagine that you're on the verge of awakening. I mean, right there on the edge. And you see, okay, for suffering, you have to know that suffering is suffering. You have to know that suffering must be understood. And you have to know that, yes, indeed, I have fully understood it. And the third one is the acknowledgement that you've succeeded on those three aspects of that noble truth, right? The knowledge that I indeed know suffering is suffering and know suffering fully. I know it, and therefore I've graduated. I don't know what better words you want to be. I've attained that. I've achieved that, right? So on each one, that's what the third one does. It's almost like, in hindsight, it's a checklist. Okay, you think you're an awakened being, do you? Here's the 12-step checklist to prove that you're an awakened being to everyone. The next one is the cause of suffering. The knowledge that craving is the cause of suffering, or in the Mahayana tradition, we say ignorance. Then number two, the knowledge that craving must be abandoned. The knowledge that craving has been abandoned, right? So understanding the cause of suffering, understanding that it needs to be abandoned, and looking at it, we got our pencil and our pad out, you check, yes, I have abandoned the cause of suffering. The cessation of suffering, the knowledge that the cessation of craving is a cessation of suffering. The cessation of ignorance is a cessation of suffering. Number two, the knowledge that cessation must be realized. And number three, the knowledge that cessation has been realized. The last one, the path, David Williamson's here, the path to the cessation of suffering. The knowledge that the Eightfold Path is the cessation of suffering. The knowledge that the path must be cultivated. And lastly, the knowledge that the path has been cultivated. Let's read number one again. The knowledge that the Eightfold Path is the cessation of suffering. So clearly that means the attainment of the Eightfold Path, the realization of the Eightfold Path is the cessation of suffering. I think that's what it was original, and as you could see, it was just too long. I had to shorten it. And again, the last one, that it has been cultivated. So now what's interesting is this adds one more answer to the big question we're always asked. How do you know you're enlightened? What's the definition of for achieving enlightenment? And we have a couple of them. Often we say it's the eradication of the three poisons: hatred, greed, and delusion, or ignorance. And some people would say that that's the classification for achieving nirvana, not enlightenment, which this one is enlightenment. So there's a couple different answers we give, but this one's pretty interesting, that when someone has realized the 12 aspects, right? So here it says the knowledge, but really, maybe it'd be more poignant if I change it to the realization on each one of them. So and here it says Buddhahood. It doesn't say nirvana or enlightenment. It says Buddhahood. According to the Mahayana school, Buddhahood is the highest of all attainments. And so I'm not sure where I got this list from, but I'm guessing it must have come from a Mahayana presentation. Okay, so your assignment is to realize the 12 aspects by next Saturday, and I'll post a couple memes to make it easy for everybody. We'll practice a practice schedule so you can easily accomplish each one on each day of the week. Yeah, it's a big job, isn't it, to be able to do that? But it's a direction, right? It's a direction that we move in. And so as I see them and I'm thinking about it, and I'm trying to think of a simpler way to look at these. In a sense, they're somewhat obvious, aren't they? In a sense, we've all been doing them for a long time now, haven't we all? You guys have all had teachings on the Four Noble Truths. So the first Noble Truth, when we teach it, that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to teach you what is samsara, what is suffering, right? And we've done classes here on Buddhism. They talk about three main kinds of suffering and then secondary types of suffering. And so Buddhism goes into great detail teaching what suffering is, because most people don't really understand how pervasive suffering is, that suffering is hidden inside the fabric of life in so many ways. Some of the sufferings are so subtle existential things. Like we talk about a subtle longing in life, that a suffering that's just under there, that there's always kind of a hole in us that we're trying to fill. This longing for belonging and fitting in and wanting to be loved, wanting to be valued, wanting to be accepted. That's such a subtle suffering, huh? Some might not even call it suffering, but it is, yeah? And these other subtle anxieties that we never know what's about to happen. We never know if we're going to be healthy tomorrow or next week. We never know if our family's going to be healthy next week. We never know if we're going to have a job. We never know all the crazy things that go on politically. We never know if a meteorite's going to smash into the earth. Whatever it may be, there's great anxiety in just what is going to happen. So again, understanding suffering, exactly what suffering is huge. We've talked about that. So first one, let's give it a check. Can you do our checks for us, Darcy? Can we do a check?
Sure. How do I do that?
Like this.
Oh, that? Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
You ready?
I can do that.
First one we got. Give us a check, Darcy. Thank you. Second one, knowledge that suffering must be fully understood. We all know that, right?
Yes.
That's not a mystery. So we don't have to worry about the first two. We're already doing it. Third, the knowledge of suffering has to be fully understood. That's going to happen one day when you realize it. It's not something you practice, right? At some point, you'll really get the Four Noble Truths and you'll say, got it, right? And balloons fall from the ceiling. So we could do the same thing with the other three. In a sense, we're already doing them all. So there's not a lot that needs to be done here. It's just understanding that this is a direction that we're moving towards. This is an outline of what we need to do to get there, but we're already doing them all. So don't think that I'm giving you a whole bunch of homework. I'll post this meme after class. Okay. Wanted to share that with you. Now I wanted to do something different. I wanted to call up Chokyi Rinpoche's, let me see what I'm doing here. I wanted to call up Chokyi Rinpoche's, here it is. And this is strange. Now, Chokyi Rinpoche's doesn't get into the three aspects, but instead his version gets into the what I would call the four aims. I don't know if this particular teaching actually has a name. I've always called it the four aims of the Four Noble Truths. And I know Stephen Batchelor has his own version of these, which is really kind of interesting. I'll go ahead and read this one because Choky's are weird to read. So, monks, regarding things that I had not previously heard, as I reflected thoroughly, a vision arose, and the insight, knowledge, understanding, and a Freudian slip, understanding and realization arose. With higher knowledge, I have comprehended suffering, that truth of noble beings. Okay. Monks, regarding things that I have not previously heard, as I reflected thoroughly, the vision arose, and the insight, knowledge, understanding, and realization arose. With higher knowledge, I have relinquished the origin of suffering. Blah, 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 blah. I have actualized the cessation of suffering. Blah, 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 blah. I have cultivated the path leading to the cessation of suffering. Monks, until I had achieved the vision, insight, knowledge, understanding, and realization of these four truths of the noble beings that are turned to three phases and comprise 12 aspects, I had not been freed from this world and its devas, from its living beings, including Maras and Brahmins, as well as mendicants and Brahmins, from its gods and humans. I had not escaped from it, severed its ties with it, or been delivered from it, nor did I dwell extensively with a mind free from error. Monks, I do have the knowledge. Monks, I do not have the knowledge that I had fully awakened to unsurpassed and perfect Buddhahood. Monks, once I had achieved the vision, insight, knowledge, understanding, and realization of turning these four truths of noble beings in three phases with 12 aspects, I was then freed from this world with its devas, with its living beings, blah, 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 and escaped from it, severed ties with it, blah, 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 blah. Monks, I then had the knowledge that I had fully awakened to unsurpassed and perfect Buddhahood. Isn't that lovely? And so now, Chokyi Rinpoche's version has been problematic as we've been trying to read it, but there's a lot of nuggets in there, right? But I'm still a little surprised because he lists the four aims here and then talks about the three aspects of the four. So it's a little bit cryptic for me. Anyways, it's quite beautiful. And on that note, I also wanted to share this. It was in Bhikkhu Bodhis. I just wanted to, again, I love the language in this. Was it this one? Maybe it was Thich Nhat Hanh's. I just wanted to share it again because it made a big impact on me when I was younger. I was in Bodh Gaya. No, I'm sorry, I was at the Deer Park where the Four Noble Truths was taught. Not in the Buddha's day. I was there a little bit after that. And I was there on pilgrimage. And I think I told the story before. They have these stone signs throughout the gardens with quotes and captions from the teachings. And it had this on a stone tablet, and I was so moved by it at the time. But just the adjectives or the vocabulary. So, like when he says here, he realized the four noble truths of suffering, seeing, and what arose in him was seeing. Now, again, I want to make that point. What qualities came to him what qualities unfolded and arose from that insight were seeing, understanding, insight, wisdom, and light. I just think that those are really beautiful, and especially the word light. I think that that's really nice. That's a nice image. Okay, so with that said, I want to look at that one just a little bit. We're doing good on time, and this is the. So this pertains more to the cultivation of the Four Truths, and the Buddha asserted a unique aim for each of the Four Noble Truths. Number one, the truth of suffering. Suffering are to be known. The truth of cessation. Their causes are to be abandoned. The truth of cessation. Their cessation is to be actualized. The truth of path. The path is to be relied upon. I think it's fairly clear, right? So sufferings are to be known. We have to understand what suffering is. Two, their causes are to be abandoned. The causes of suffering we need to abandon. Number three, the truth of cessation. Their cessation is to be actualized. The stopping of the causes of suffering have to be actualized, have to be committed. And number four, the path itself, the Eightfold Path, is to be relied upon for doing that. So this is a beautiful short instruction for working with the Four Noble Truths. And lastly, any questions about that so far?
I do.
Yeah.
Tarpa, I do.
Yeah.
Where does this come from, the cultivation of the Four Noble Truths?
I don't know.
Where did you
I
get
don't
it?
remember. I just don't remember where it came from. I've been teaching it and writing it and for ages. The thing about it is I studied Tibetan Buddhism. So oftentimes the things that we studied, they never made a big distinction whether it was Theravada or Mahayana.
Okay.
And so I actually don't. So here's a couple thoughts. I know that Tsongkhapa shares it, but I think it goes back. The earliest that I know is it's asserted that Maitreya, the Bodhisattva Maitreya, shares it to monks, and that comes from the Mahayana Sutra. That's the oldest I go back, but I don't know if it goes further back to the Theravada.
Okay. I was interested because it's almost identical to Stephen Batchelor's take on it.
Yeah, they probably stole it from Stephen. You know, they're terrible at that plagiarism. Just more of Stephen's work being stolen. No, this is a real, I have a feeling it's Mahayana. I just like saying I don't know, just to shock everybody. You're not supposed to say that. There's a lot I don't know. But yeah, I think I'm guessing it's Mahayana, and it's shared as coming from Maitreya. And of course, Maitreya is a bodhisattva, so he's not like sitting around writing it down. I think Maitreya's work, if I'm not mistaken, is usually asserted by Nagarjuna, a teacher of Nagarjuna. I think it's Nagarjuna. So whenever they say attributed them to Maitreya, it's the work of Nagarjuna. But I'm not a scholar. I'm not a person to ask that one. Thanks for asking such a difficult question. Man, we're going to have to move you to the back of the class. Teasing. It's funny because it's not true. Tashi.
Yeah, so it talks about there's the three, like the truth, the suffering, the cause, and the cessation are the three, and then the 12. I'm trying to get those numbers figured out.
Well, this one doesn't match up with those as far as I know.
Okay.
So the
Well, I
three
was
aspects.
thinking the three aspects are like knowing, abandoning it, and then cultivating, right?
No, they're in fact they're really quite different. That's kind of my point, is that Chokyi Rinpoche really seems to go off topic. And let's take another look at. Oh, I have it right here. Let's just go back to this. See, it's the third one here is in past tense, so they don't really match. They're all the knowledge or the realization, and so the first two are realization, and well, I guess they're all realizations, but the third one's in past tense or future tense. So as far as I know, they're not connected with that at all. So it seems like Chokyi Rinpoche goes off topic, but then he talks about the three aspects. So maybe I'm missing something. Can our wise Sangha?
That's what I was getting at, is like the three aspects are like knowing that there is suffering and abandoning the cause of the suffering. And then the third
actualizing
part would be,
and relying upon. They're not connected at all.
But the actualizing it, is it?
Well, they're all, every one of these is actualizing only.
Okay.
It's just a question of what you're realizing and when you're realizing.
Okay,
That's what
so
this
I'm just
seems
making
like.
it more complicated than it is.
No, you're doing exactly what I did when I read it too. I was trying to, clearly I thought there must be some kind of connection. But again, Chokyi Rinpoche's commentary has just been difficult this whole class. So, but there's been some jewels in there as well. Okay,
So can I have two questions?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
in that, aside from that, so when a person goes through these, they don't just boom, boom, boom in succession, right? They'll go and then they drop back a little sometimes and until they get it.
No doubt about it. Yeah.
Okay.
Progress is not a straight line.
Okay.
We go back and forth. And then remember that the last one, the Eightfold Path, is we're utilizing that to help us with all of them. So again, these are can't remember the word I'm trying to use. They all connect with each other, right? I don't believe there is a necessary. Well, I'll take that back. The first three are clear. You have to understand what suffering is, and then understand the roots of that suffering before you can think about the cessation of suffering. But what happens is it's kind of like spiral learning. So when you first learn it, you have a basic idea of what it is, and then every time you come back around to it, you get a deeper and a deeper, or a higher and a higher understanding of those.
That's
so
what I was, yeah.
they all come in holistically. We understand them all together. Yeah, everything in Buddhism is spiral learning. We always keep coming back to things with a deeper understanding each time.
Yeah, this is cool. I'm making connections here. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. And lastly, I want to get to one more thing before we get too late. People often wonder, Buddhism loves its numbers, I tell you. In fact, there's a book you can buy online. It's called The Buddhist Book of Numbers. The 3 this and the 4 this and the 12 and the 7. It's a huge book, you wouldn't believe it. And I can't keep them all straight. But many people ask, is the 3 aspects of the Four Noble Truths similar to the 4 aspects of the Four Noble Truths, or the 16 aspects? And because, of course, they sound so familiar. And I just wanted to clarify that they're not related. The 12 aspects, which we just covered, is kind of the outline or checklist of the direction we're moving in. The 6 aspects of the Four Noble Truths is an actual contemplative practice. All right? So this is actual cultivating. This is instructions for how to realize the Four Noble Truths. Or let's say it's an aid to those, because each one, they're slightly different topics, but they relate to each one. I'm going to go through this briefly. If anybody's interested in practicing this, you can find this chart in Tibetan Buddhist Essentials, Volume 3. And that's a free download from our website, sptonline.com. So now they team these up with the various truths. So the truth of suffering, the contemplations are impermanence, suffering, emptiness, and selflessness. Some of you might recognize that as the four seals or the four conditions, the four universal truths. We talked about the three universal truths being impermanence, suffering, and selflessness. In the Mahayana school, they add one more to it, and they add emptiness. And something, well, actually what they do is they combine emptiness and selfishness, and they add one, which is nirvana. Nevertheless, that's basically what the contemplation is for the truth of suffering. I hope I'm not making this more complicated. I'm trying to simplify it. The second one is the truth of suffering. And we contemplate, and when we say contemplate, we take it into our insight meditation like we're learning now. You can sit on the back porch with a cup of coffee and contemplate them. And the subjects are cause, the cause of ignorance in this case, or the cause of suffering, its origin, strong production. The ignorance and affliction possesses a great force which produces strong suffering. And conditions, the attachments and conditions that allow for such a thing. Then we get the truth of cessation. Cessation itself, what is it? It's pacification. It's superb, that it is a superb source of benefit and happiness, and definite emergence, which is another word for renunciation. That liberation is the total, unreversible release from suffering. And then lastly, we have the truth of the path itself, awareness, that wisdom directly realizing self and emptiness is the antidote to afflictions. Achievement, that wisdom directly is the achievement because its direction is realizing the nature of the mind. And deliverance, which is that these conditions create irreversible liberation. I didn't want to spend too much time talking about that, but I did want to make my point that the 16 aspects are really much different than the 12 aspects. The 16 aspects, clearly something that was written a long time later, and it's there for the cultivation of the Four Noble Truths. And we practiced it, I think, last year. A bunch of us, we were doing a skillful living program, a bunch of people wanted to practice it, and we found it rewarding. We practiced it together. And with that said, does anybody have any questions? Are we doing okay? I think I've said enough. Okay. Good to hear. I'm always attempting to make the classes shorter and a little bit easier, but I never get around to it. So today we explored the way to cultivate and realize the Four Noble Truths. This is a complex teaching and practice which will require much review. We'll need one more week to finish the finish the Wheel Turning Sutra. Our sutra ends with the awakening of the monk Khandana, and it's quite an interesting tale. So that's going to be fun to explore next week. I want everybody to remember that the sutra teachings are meant as practice instructions. So in order to get the greatest benefit, we need to engage fully with them, utilizing the three great objectives of study, contemplation, and practice. Your work this week is to discover how these teachings apply to your daily life, transforming them from words on a page into living Dharma. So with that said, let's end today's class with our altruistic affirmation. May all be healthy, may all be prosperous, may all be well. May all be present, free of past regret and future worry. May all abide in constant appreciation, which is a source of great joy and contentment. May all realize their true nature and the true nature of reality, which is awakening. I want to thank everybody for coming, and I'd like to remind everybody that tomorrow we have our 10-week meditation course, and we are going to be learning Vipassana meditation. It's a great, great class. So big thanks for everybody for coming and making my Saturday fun, and I hope you got a lot out of the teachings. Bye-bye. See you tomorrow.
Bye-bye. Thank you,
Bye, thank you.
Tarpa.
See you tomorrow.
Bye,
You're
everyone.
welcome.
Bye.
Anytime. You're
Awesome.
welcome. Bye-bye.